I think we're in a breakthrough point where this will change, and I think it will change the industry as a whole. Very competitive to recover from seawater, and even more competitive than many of the terrestrial sources. Pressures that we see nowadays for having access to rare metals and minerals. If you look at nature, nature doesn't have membranes that do only one thing. We have not evolved yet to that point, but I see the technology moving in a major way towards the direction of multifunctional membranes, recovery of minerals and recycling of minerals for the greater good. It has evolved, but as I said, at this point, it's only used in U.S. military. I have designed and built one of the biggest plants in Saudi Arabia using renewable solar power. I think we're just scratching the surface of desalination.
Welcome to the Salty Water Podcast, where we talk with thought leaders, innovators, and decision makers in desalination, water reuse, and water policy. 25 plus years ago, I was involved in the founding of the Middle East Desalination Research Center in Muscat, Oman. The center was founded to bring together Arabs and Israelis to work together on research and development with the common goal of lowering the cost of seawater desalination. The center is an international organization hosted in Oman by the Foreign Ministry, and upon my arrival in Muscat, I was summoned to a meeting with the Foreign Minister at the time, His Honor Yusuf bin Alawi. He posed a challenge to the center, and that challenge was to find methods to recover minerals and salts from the brine stream. His stated goal was to find commercial and financial benefits from the recovery of useful products from the waste stream, and thereby reduce the overall cost of seawater desalination. Ever since that conversation in Muscat many years ago, I've always been interested in this topic of brine recovery. Today we have the pleasure of talking with probably the one person in the world who in recent years has made substantial progress on the topic of brine valorization, and that is Nikolay Voutchkov. Nikolay is an internationally recognized expert in the field of desalination and membrane application technology, with extensive experience in supporting the development, procurement, financing, and implementation of desalination projects worldwide. Nikolay received his master's degree in engineering from UCLA and then worked in the consulting field with Malcolm Kearney and Montgomery Watson. Then he moved on to be a project developer as the chief technology officer at Poseidon. Nikolay has served as a board member of the International Desalination and Reuse Association and has been recognized with prestigious awards for his work from the IRDA, as well as the International Water Reuse Association, the American Academy of Environmental Engineers. He's one of the principal authors of the American Waterworks Association's Manual of Water Supply Practices on Reverse Osmosis and Nanofiltration, and of the WHO's guidance for the health and environmental aspects applicable to desalination. Nikolay has authored or co-authored over 10 books and at least 100 technical articles in the field of desalination and management of brine from desalination plants. Nikolay, welcome to the Salty Water Podcast today, and I'm proud to say I've known you for many, many years and followed your career and happy to call you a friend. How are you today?
Thank you, Eric. Very much appreciate it. And I look forward to the opportunity to discuss how the world looks like in the field of brine mining and valorization. This has been a challenge, I guess, that existed for a while. And we, in a way, have pushed it aside because of the fact that we were not able to find easy ways of recovering key minerals, as well as develop markets where these minerals and metals could be of use. The business evolved, the markets evolved, including the terrestrial markets for various minerals and metals evolved in a point that we're in a very interesting crossroad where many of the metals and minerals contained in seawater now are very competitive to recover from seawater, and even more competitive than many of the terrestrial sources. Also, seawater is available to over 80% of the population of the world. So it really eliminates the pressures that we see nowadays for having access to rare metals and minerals. As we see wars being fought, as we see presidents like ours making statements that show the significance of access to minerals and metals, desalination technology, and more specifically brine valorization, is now opening a new path a new venue for us to be able to do so at a grand scale, at a scale of world as a whole. So this is a very exciting topic for me.
Yeah, let's before we dive deeper into that topic, I'd like to take advantage of your decades of experience. During the course of the last 20, 30, 40 years, we've seen tremendous change, innovation, and growth, acceptance of seawater reverse osmosis worldwide as the predominant and really the go-to methodology for desalting seawater. But, looking over the course of your career, what do you see as the sustainable pathways to seawater reverse osmosis going forward? Kind of big picture, standing back and looking over the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, I would say one interesting feature of membranes since they were created, and they're about the same age as I am. The first concept and publication on this topic was from a UCLA professor at the age when I was born, 1959. So that's 65 years ago. So the idea of reverse osmosis as we know it and technology of separation of water from salts by membranes is actually not a very new one. And what's interesting is the concept of separation of water from salts has not really changed much. As membranes were created back then, until today, they only do one thing. They separate water from salts. They don't have ability to separate minerals or metals. So that is one past step I see that is moving towards a major change where the membranes will start doing multiple things. If you look at nature, nature doesn't have membranes that do only one thing. Membranes in nature do many separations of various minerals and metals. And we have not evolved yet to that point, but I see the technology moving in a major way towards the direction of multifunctional membranes. I think we're in a breakthrough point where this will change, and I think it will change the industry as a whole because it will allow us to get closer to nature in terms of efficiency of recovery of minerals and recycling of minerals for the greater good.
And that's something you see the membrane manufacturers working on currently. Is that current development of technology, or you see it off in the future?
I would say, it's very interesting that the reverse osmosis desalination market has been very competitive to the point where main membrane suppliers have been limited in the funds they have to put into research and development. So I've worked with Hydronautics on research and development with DuPont and some of the other major players in the field. They have really been relying more heavily on nowadays on private sector to develop the key new concepts and ideas. They are waiting for the private sector to brew things up to the point of flat sheet solutions and then pick it up from there and turn it into commercial elements. I mean, currently, a good example is the multifunctional membranes that we've been developing in NEOM, where we have a membrane that not only separates water from salts, but also separates particular salt out of all the other salts in the seawater. That multifunctional membrane is now being developed in that partnership, where the private sector develops the initial heavy duty research and development, and the public sector and the big industry players step in to actually take it to commercialization. That's what I see happening.
Interesting. Well, that's news to me. That's very exciting. They actually have membranes be selective in what salts they can recover. It's a
Yeah.
fabulous concept. Digging down a little deeper into your work in Saudi Arabia in the recent years and brine valorization, what were the technical challenges? How did you overcome them? What do you see as the challenges going forward? I know you've done a lot of work with combining NF with RO and some thermal technologies. Where did you start and where have you gotten to in terms of making progress?
Well, first, I would say when membrane separation and valorization started, we really mainly have thermal technologies to concentrate brine and to separate cells from brine, thermal crystallization and membrane and thermal concentration. That has really changed for the last, I would say, 7, 8 years. I started my work in the membrane concentration and crystallization processes when I worked for SWCC, the Saline Water Conversion Corporation, and their research center, Desalination Technology and Research Institute in Jubail. And at that time, we basically worked with the industry to develop membrane concentration and start dabbling into membrane crystallization. The reason why brine mining and brine valorization has not really advanced to a significant extent is the cost of concentrating brine products, as well as crystallizing individual brines. That has evolved into now having methods to do that, commercial membranes available to do that through membranes. And I do believe that looking back at nature, trying to do what nature does in terms of recycling minerals between the outside world and the world of the living creature cells, uh, everything is done by membranes, and those membranes are multifunctional. So that's what I've been following as a hint, as to say, from the world of the environment around us and the sea world that we have around us to create the concepts of membrane-based processes. And the difference is huge. If you think about membrane concentration, the energy demand for a membrane concentration of the brines is about 3 times lower. Currently, we can do that at 7.5 to 8 kilowatt hours per cubic meter of brine. Thermally, that takes about 25 to 30 cubic meters, kilowatt hours per cubic meter of brine. So that is very efficient, as well as in membrane crystallization. Now we could crystallize sodium chloride, for example, at a energy demand of about 7.5 kilowatt hours per cubic meter of brine, as compared to 75 to 80 kilowatt hours by thermal crystallization.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
those major changes basically are pushing the opportunity for us to start making salts at prices that are more competitive than terrestrial sources of the same
Right.
salts. That
Right.
is really the
That's right.
breakthrough in the technology recently that allows us to see that direction of brine mining and brine valorization becoming a reality.
That's a huge step change in cost for sure and energy requirements. Is this a matter of polymer science? Is it the
Yeah.
polymer designs in the membranes that is where the challenge is to refine the designs?
Yeah, it is really, yes, it is combination of two things. One is the changes in polymer design, and then the other one is the type of processes we use. In membrane concentration, we use reverse osmosis, but it is assisted by creating an additional draw force by letting the permeate to be saline. In normal reverse osmosis membranes, as we know, the permeate tends to be drinking water quality, usually less than 1,000 milligrams per of TDS. In
Right.
concentrating membranes, we maintain salinities of 33 to 35,000 TDS, and that allow us to lift off and provide additional osmotic pressure to concentrate beyond the pressure that we get by pressurization of the brine inside. So at every step of concentration, we can achieve another 70,000 TDS at pressures, 70,000 increment in salinity at pressures that are the same as operating pressures in reverse osmosis systems. The big
Mhm.
benefit of that is actually it's relatively easy to adopt existing reverse osmosis, spiral reverse osmosis technology into commercial products for membrane concentration. Membrane crystallization is completely different in a way that we cannot really concentrate membrane, crystallize by using the same principles as we do with reverse osmosis, but we could use forward osmosis using a draw solution. And in our case, what we developed and what I believe is the future is what nature does. And that is using a particular draw solution with very, very peculiar and very interesting benefits to the technology and to nature, and that is magnesium chloride. If you think about
Mhm.
how species in seawater adapt to salinity changes, it's a very interesting process. They call that osmoregulating mechanism, and that is that when species are in environment where salinity is low, in order to adjust their osmotic pressure, they crystallize, they form tiny crystals of magnesium chloride inside the cells. And
Okay.
that allows them to drop the osmotic pressure inside the cells. When they do get into areas of a higher salinity, for example, shallow waters where the salinity is elevated, In that case, what cells do is dissolve the magnesium chloride, creating additional pressure on the backside. And that actual change from crystals to liquid state in magnesium chloride requires very little temperature. Only half a degree allows you to concentrate twice the magnesium
Okay.
chloride. That is the principle we're using in membrane crystallization we developed in NEOM. So we're using as a draw solution magnesium chloride, as
Okay.
nature does. On one side of the membrane, we would put the brine, for example, and it could be applied to different brines. Let's say sodium chloride, concentrated brine. On the other side, we have the magnesium chloride. Magnesium chloride serves as a draw solution, takes the water out of the sodium chloride, and you start seeing tiny crystals forming between 30 to 40 minutes on the surface of on the side of the south feet area. And then the water is being drawn by the membrane, by the magnesium chloride. And as it gets diluted, we put it through a small cooling tower, which only by a change of half degree temperature allows us to reconcentrate that draw solution twice and then recycle it again. So that principle, which is basically what happens in cells of osmoregulating organisms, is what we use to generate a draw solution and do that very energy efficiently.
So it sounds like you've effectively demonstrated it, proven it. You're confident that the science and the chemistry and the technology works. What I know that you talked about the terrestrial minerals and their costs. Obviously, that's an issue in terms of adoption.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you've got a big push for zero liquid discharge and no returning of things to the either industrial situations or seawater RO plants. No, so there's sort of a push factor from zero liquid discharge. Is it really the cost of the process against the value in the current marketplace of the materials? That's really
Yeah.
the economic problem, the challenge. It's not a regulatory problem. It's kind of just an economic commercial challenge.
Yeah, it is to some extent a lucky mix of coincidence of events, um, where we see the minerals available through terrestrial sources becoming more scarce and, for various reasons, more costly to make, versus the technologies to extract those minerals from seawater becoming less and less costly. I'll give you
Right.
a very good and interesting example for the most valuable and largest amount of mineral in brine, and that is sodium chloride. It is interesting that the main use of sodium chloride is mainly in the Middle East, and it's mainly for the purposes of chlor-alkali industry. And the reason why the chlor-alkali industry is so developed is allows the Middle Eastern countries a different way of using oil. They produce liquid PVC, which is the core for producing any other plastics in the world. So the way they produce liquid PVC is by two sources, oil and salt. So sodium chloride is very critical from that perspective. Until recently, all the sodium chloride was coming through natural deposits that existed along the shores of the Gulf, of the Arabian Gulf. And
Right.
that was easy source, low cost. But guess what happens? As any other terrestrial surface source, now those natural deposits of salt along the shores of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and others, Kuwait, they're running out. So that puts us in a position where they are looking for different sources that are competitive in price. And one of the sources that people are using to replace this conventional source is Indian solar salt. And what's interesting about Indian solar salt for the last 5 years is because of global warming, the effect there is heavier rains, higher humidity, which have reduced dramatically in almost a half the production of solar pond-based salt in India, which is the traditional source of alternative traditional source of salt. So with those two circumstances, we end up with the natural sources depleted, and in global warming actually pushing the cost of production of solar salt to be very, very high. So, for example, now the cost of production of salt, even through solar ponds, relatively low salinity a low purity salt,
Yep.
96% purity. That is about 25 to $30. With the technologies I explained, we could make the same salt at $18, even less.
Girl.
And that
Wow.
doesn't involve the transportation cost that it will certainly add to the $25 that you're buying from India. If with delivery, the cost nowadays are $35 to $40, while you're producing it on your location near the user of the salt at about
Mhm.
18 to $20. So that is really the change in technologies of brine crystallization and brine mining, along with the natural events that occurred on the markets and global warming, are very interesting coincidental effect that really is making brine mining shine through and become a very attractive future direction in desalination.
That's extremely exciting. I guess it was opportune for you to be there at that time to be able to develop this technology and have the funding in the moment.
Yes.
And that's all very exciting. I want to ask you one quick question before we run out of time, which is renewables. And what do you see in the future for more tying of renewables to power seawater desalination?
Yeah, I have designed and built one of the biggest plants in Saudi Arabia using renewable solar power, and it has not been very successful. That's why you don't hear anything about it. It's 60,000 cubic meters a day desalination plant nobody have heard about. I think renewables are difficult source for large scale desalination because of the cost of energy associated with having quality of power that is needed for the desalination processes. Although the solar panels themselves are about 4 cents per kilowatt hour if you convert them into cost, so they're very, very reasonable. When you add up all the other conversion factors, the fact that you need alternate current, you need it 24 hours a day, you need it with very little sag, all those things, it require this power to be transformed on multiple steps. So the best
Mhm.
cost of power that we make today through solar is 38 cents. Everything included is 38 cents per kilowatt hour. That is really not very competitive. So the way I see it, where the future is a very little known yet technology in its making, currently adopted, developed by Lockheed Martin and adopted by the U.S. Government, more specifically military, and that is technology based on use of rubidium chloride in actually cold fusion based processes. That technology has been developed about 10 years ago, but mainly has been used for military purposes. And it's about time that it will show up on the world scene.
Yeah.
It is extremely interesting because the main source of energy for that technology will be seawater brine.
Okay.
Rubidium chloride, what the technology runs on is interesting, and that is an isotope of rubidium chloride that has an extra neutron. And the technology basically cuts the connection between the neutron and the core and directly releases that energy into electricity. The
Mm.
size of a unit that produces 10 megawatts of electricity nowadays, the last time I've seen it, is the size of a business case. And you know how
Wow.
big of a size is 10 megawatt plant? It is the size of
Absolutely.
a
Absolutely.
of a Walmart. So that
Okay.
technology is amazing. It is in the works. What is very interesting also is when you look at the amount of rubidium chloride available in the brine, it's about 1.8 times the amount the desalination plant consumes. So desalination plants, as long as we apply those reactors and extract the rubidium chloride to run and produce electricity, desalination plants will become not only self-sufficient as far as energy, but they will
Yeah.
actually be exporter of energy and electricity, and everybody will have access to it. It's no longer going to be available only to certain countries that have oil reserves. Everybody can tap into this particular source. So that's how I see that being
Okay.
the next step in energy. I'm not as and having to work in both wind and solar panels with real plants and seeing the costs and seeing the challenges. I mentioned the challenges associated with renewable solar power. There is a very interesting challenge associated with wind power as well, which I faced
Yeah.
in Qatar. And that is that because of global warming, the direction of currents that define the direction of wind and speed of wind nowadays
Mhm.
change every 5 to 7 years. They used to change 70 to 80 years. So if you build a plant that lasts for 25 years, you have for sure, steady wind that allows you to produce steady electricity. Nowadays, the steadiness is only 5 to 7 years. So
Mm.
you can't really fund a project for 5 to 7 year turnaround time.
Right,
So
right,
that's why coastal wind power generation is also not a very, I would say,
reliable.
reliable source for large
Right.
large scale units. For smaller
I
units,
know.
absolutely.
Let's see, the cold fusion is really fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. It sort of makes desalination plants a perpetual energy machine,
Yeah,
creating its own energy and then using the energy to make more water. Yeah.
yeah. If you look at the latest, one of the latest satellites that was sent by Elon Musk I live in Florida and I track very closely. Living in Orlando, I'm close to the space coast, and you would notice that he had a mission to Mars. And on the top of his agenda, what he was looking in Mars in underground sources of water is rubidium chloride. So you would ask
Right.
yourself why? Well, this is why, because I do
Energy.
believe this reactor which already exists, it has evolved. But as I said, at this point, it's only used in US military. It was developed by Lockheed Martin, started in 2016. And the only reason I know about it is because I've been working on developing membranes for selective removal of
Okay.
rubidium chloride directly from seawater. So that allows you to fuel your system and stay underwater forever.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. Well, we're running out of time. I want to thank you for your time today. It's been fascinating. Learned definitely a few new things. And as always, enjoyed my conversation with you and wish you the best as we go forward. Maybe we can do part two sometime and continue the conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Eric. And I always look forward to share some new ideas and to listen to what the world has to say in the world of desalination. I think we're just scratching the surface of desalination, and the membrane technology is still to evolve. I would say
Okay.
if I have to assess where we are in the desalination technology field, I would say we're at the time of computers that were like the 360, 370 IBMs before the
Yeah.
time of semiconductors. We still have a huge opportunity for this technology to grow and to become extremely efficient, and ultimately to mimic nature to its efficiency and to its applications.
Maybe next time we can explore that part of the topic a little bit more. I think that's fascinating. Thank you so much, Nikolay.
Thank you, Eric.
Appreciate it.